Hello and welcome to the CinemATL podcast. The CinemATL podcast is a weekly podcast that examines the world of entertainment through the lens of local Atlanta filmmakers. That would be us, your hosts. I am Michael D. Friedman, and that is...
Martin Kelley.
And in this week's episode, we're talking about some frequently asked questions that we hear from first-time filmmakers in our technique topic. But first, before we do that, Martin, why don't you tell our listeners how they can help the podcast out?
You can help the podcast out by contributing full paid advertisement on YouTube for the podcast. No, actually, the best way to help us is just comment and rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That really helps us, especially the comments and the ratings, and in sharing it, of course, with your friends and neighbors. You can hear us on your favorite podcast formats, which include Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and even now on Google Podcasts as well as YouTube.
Yes, and we also want to hear from you. You can always tweet us at CinemATL or at my personal account at Badger33.
Or hit me up at Marte_Real1.
And don't forget about our Instagram account. It's at CinemATL Podcast, all one word. And going on right now, you can vote in our Movie Madness tournament. We're deciding the best sports movie of all time, bracket style, and you can vote in our stories.
Absolutely. It's going really good so far, even though a couple of my favorites actually have been eliminated already, which is very upsetting. But
well, mine pulled off an upset. I was surprised Goon made it forward.
I saw that yours did, yes.
I swear
and I
I'm
like
not
Goon.
stacking the ballot.
I do like Goon, but I voted for the other. So anyway, but that shows that we're on the level here. It's definitely open to the public, and we appreciate all the people who have participated so far, and keep it going. March Madness is real. And you can also listen to the podcast at our legacy site, CinemATL.com.
Well, all right. That's enough of the intro chit chat. Why don't we just get into this technique topic?
Absolutely.
All right. So you want to make your own short film or feature, but you don't know where to begin. Well, Martin and I started making our own short films nearly 20 years ago. That's how old we are. So anyway, we've decided that we've seen a lot of common mistakes and pitfalls from first-time film directors and producers, and we felt it would be a good idea to answer some frequently asked questions for the first-time filmmaker. So we have a list that we hear a lot, and we're going to just go through them.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, the first question I get asked a lot, and this one's kind of close to my heart, but it's basically, do I need to invest in a lot of equipment before I do my short film? And the short answer for me is no. You can always make what you have work. I want to tell a story that I have about a short film that I did a while back called Redneck Sitting on a Couch Watching NASCAR. And I filmed this with a really cheap digital camera that recorded 30-second video clips, and I had no editing software at the time except for the default movie maker software that came with Windows. Had very little sound recording equipment, but I managed to put it together, and my film actually won a competition that it was in, and it ended up playing at the Atlanta Film Festival, and then it got accepted into some other film festivals as well. So I mean, I'm not trying to just brag on myself, but I think if you can use the tools that you have, you can always make something. Just use it as another challenge to overcome.
And didn't you also, like, I know several of our shorts have, but I think that's also one of them that was on broadcast, was on PBA.
Yeah,
right?
It made it to Atlanta Shorts, a short film series that was on a couple of years ago on public broadcasting. But yeah,
so all the way to television.
Yeah, and on a little cheap camera, I made it work because, like, we're going to get to this later, but I didn't have any sound equipment to really record good sound. But the way I made the film work was that I did a lot of voiceover in it, so that I could record directly into my computer. And that was just a workaround that I did to make it work. So that's just my advice to first-time filmmakers. Maybe you don't have the best equipment, but you can find ways around your limitations. And it actually, sometimes you can make those limitations work for you.
Absolutely. And I think, we talked about this with with John Pruner. Actually, he talked a little about the obstacles and the theory about obstacles making for good creative choices, and that's what you have to think about as a filmmaker. Is you got to think about what what equipment do you have and what equipment can you use and how do you use it to the optimum limit. You know what I'm saying? But that being said, these days your phone is a better camera than we ever had when we started. I mean,
Yep, yep.
think about the images that you can achieve now. Everything that is on most phones these days is a higher quality image than we were shooting with back in the day, and getting films done and even broadcast at the time. And so today, that could that piece of equipment can be all you need to make some really solid films.
And there have been feature films that were released in theaters that were shot on an iPhone. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, don't think that you don't delay trying to do something because I want to wait till I get the new red camera, or I want to shoot in 4K. Some of those things could be barriers to distribution later. But if you're trying to just show your worth and trying to create a short film to practice, or to just get your name out there, you don't need all the fancy equipment. I mean, you're not looking to hit it out of the park on your first film necessarily. You don't expect to like get into Sundance, and we'll talk about that later, or something like that. But if you're looking to just do something creative and you're a first time filmmaker and you want to put something to tape, which like tape doesn't exist anymore. I mean, tape in air quotes, but
Exactly.
if you want to do something like that, just go ahead and do it. Don't let these type of things be obstacles into you being creative.
No, absolutely. And yeah, this is the right time for you to be experimenting. So you don't need to invest into a lot of equipment to experiment. I mean, when you're making your first film, I know everybody wants to make a fantastic revelatory first film, but 99.9% of the time it's not going to be Citizen Kane. So this is the time to experiment and see if your voice works, see if your style works. And you can do this on limited equipment. And so I agree that it's not something that you need to invest a lot in to make your first film.
I remember the first short film that we did together, Blame Society.
Yeah.
Um, we used it as a learning experience. We learned, we had many lessons learned, from get how to improve our lighting, to like getting better sound, all those things, and from there we just built. And you can't become a great filmmaker until you take that first step. So that's
No, and one thing I'll say here in this part, just because I don't know that some of the other questions allow me to touch on it, but what I'll say is that yes, you don't need the fanciest equipment in the world, but what you should do is do your best to approach it as professionally and by the best standards of
right,
filmmaking that you can with whatever equipment you have. Because
right,
to your point, Mike, we didn't have the best equipment and we were experimenting, trying to figure out lighting and how and sound, of course, was a big issue for us too. But what we did on the steps to making that was as professional as we could be. And I think that sort of set the tone for how serious we actually took it, even though the equipment was limited.
right. And that leads us into our second question. Basically, it's do I need a microphone? My camera's got one built in. Why would I need a microphone? The answer is yes, you do. I mean, granted, like we talked about limitations in filmmaking technology. If you don't have one, you can try to do it the best you can. But if you want to be considered, a serious filmmaker, you do have to worry about sound. Bad sound is one of the most important things that can ruin your film. you
Right,
know you can
right.
have low quality picture, you could have you know not much set design, but if you have bad sound, it's going to immediately take the viewer's attention away, and they're going to be focusing on how the sound is, not the story you're trying to tell.
No, absolutely. And here's something I'll say about that too is that sound is a target. It's not a destination. It's basically, I we have improved our sound every step of the way, including feature films to feature films. I mean, we have not had perfect sound yet, and we've been, investing more in it and doing a better job with it every time. But it's something to aspire to. So
Right.
yes, it's very important, and do as best as you can. And one of the reasons, here's why: the internal microphone is not going to create great sound because it's it's at the location of the camera. What happens when your actors are 20 feet away, and having a conversation? What happens when when you can't, you can only pick up what the sound just in front of the
Right.
camera. I mean, it's really, important to understand how movies are made. Again, this goes back to the how movies are made. Movies are
Right.
made with sound on each actor for the most part, or in an area close to the actors that it can be picked up and feel natural. That's what happens with bad sound, is that it doesn't feel natural. When, for instance, on that first film, and we did a diner scene,
Hmm.
and we didn't know how to capture sound correctly, and we could not hear the conversation from the
Right.
actors because the we didn't have microphones in place to capture the sound correctly, and all we could hear was the the, the workings of the diner the whole time, so we had
Yeah.
to reshoot that whole scene.
The Waffle House ordering and chopping
Yes.
on the grill and scatter, smother,
And the
cover. Yeah.
I know,
It
and
was
the
great
bad thing was
ambient sound.
it was a great location. It was fantastic location, and kudos to us for actually getting that location. And the images were great, but you couldn't. We had to reshoot the whole thing because we couldn't control that sound environment, and it ruined any chance of that scene actually playing. So it's definitely something to consider and do your best. It's easy to research, and there's a lot of tips online on how to get it. Even if we're not saying go out and buy high end sound gear. We're
Right.
saying go get some basic sound gear that will do the job for you and make the best sound that you can get. To your point, again, we're still
Right.
experimenting, but if you experiment and do something great, but the sound's not so good, it's really going to limit, the appeal of whatever you do.
I mean, I think this goes back to the caveat that you put to the first question is that, yes, you might not have the most advanced equipment, but try to shoot the film as you would if you were trying, if as professionals would do it. So that means you have sound, you have lighting, you try to do set design, all those things that really make a feature film work and the professional films work. You should try your best to emulate. Now, you might not have the best equipment to do it, but you need to try it. You can't just say, "Oh, we're going to shoot this handheld on my iPhone with no sound equipment," right?
Right, right,
Um, and so, I mean, that kind of goes to a spinoff from this topic is also lighting. Lighting is also very important in a film.
sure,
You can get away if you're shooting outside and during the day without lighting, but
right.
once you're in an interior or if it's dark, you really need to get the lighting. I mean, that's a lesson we learned also on Blame Society. We filmed outside and we thought we tried. We didn't have professional lights, but we had clamp lights with
Hmm.
bulbs and
Hmm.
we directed them, but they were really too low and you could barely. I remember seeing a floating Adidas symbol on the screen
Yes,
when we tried to project it
yes.
on a screening, because that's all you could see was this reflective Adidas logo.
Right, right.
Which I think we can probably talk about that too as a side FAQ is that try to cover up logos and things in your films. Don't use
Sure.
copyrighted material if you can avoid it.
Yep. Absolutely.
Like try to wear have your cast wear items of clothing that have logos on it and things like that.
Yeah, unless they're uniquely designed. Like for instance, you create
Right.
T-shirts
Right.
specific to the character, and you create your own T-shirts or what have you. I mean, that's something smart to do. But otherwise, yeah, you don't want Nike logos and Adidas
Yeah.
logos to be all over the film because it's technically done without permission, which could actually lead to trouble down the line at some point.
Right.
And technically it probably won't, but at the same time,
Right.
get into the habit. Get into the
Well,
habit of
yeah,
doing these
exactly.
things.
It's all about building these habits. That's what you're trying to do on your first film, and and like I said, you probably won't get in trouble for it. In fact, if you are doing your first film and you happen to see a logo or something on this, don't worry about it. But
Right.
try your best to avoid it because you never know. Like if you do upload your short to YouTube, Nike could see it and put a copyright infringement notice on it, and you'll have to take down your video. I mean, you're not gonna get
Right.
sued or anything. Like Nike's not gonna go
Right.
after a small filmmaker, but they have these automated ways to check these things now on YouTube.
Hmm. Yep.
So
And
moving on. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
well, real quick. Also, like some really, I mean, this stuff is sort of common sense when you start to think about it. Like, if you don't want any logos, but you have people drinking something, you basically, if it's a bottle, you pull the label off the bottle, or
Right.
you do really simple things like that. And again,
Or make sure their hands covering the logo,
exactly,
or and
exactly.
you know,
Just little things like that, covering the logo of the laptop that a character's using,
right,
that kind of thing. I mean, just anything that you can do to avoid, having these things show up, because it kind of shows a little bit of the fact that it's an amateur film if it's not
right.
done this way.
Now, yeah, and then now there's a good way and bad way to avoid those logos too. Is you don't want to just put a piece of
No,
masking tape over somebody's shirt. You need to find more clever ways to hide it than that. Otherwise, people are going to be like, "Oh, well, they're obviously covering a logo, and it's just going to
right,
look weird."
right, exactly. It looks
But
like a
yeah,
music video. It'll be looking like a music video. Don't blur it, like
blur it out. Yeah.
like the rap music video.
All right, so let's move on to our next question that we get asked a lot is, do I need to pay my cast and crew? So this one is kind of a blurry line. I
Absolutely.
think when you're starting out and you're doing this as a independent no budget project, if you have no budget, you can find cast and crew that will work with you for free, because they might be in the similar situations that you are.
Right.
Now, moving along as you move on in your career, you really should find ways to pay your cast and crew, because people don't want to keep working for you for free. And if you've done 5 films and gotten into festivals and stuff like that, people are going to start expecting you to actually pay them for the work they've done. There's like, just getting exposure does not do anybody any good if they've already kind of broken out. They're not going to want to work on a film for free if they don't have a reason to do it. You have to give reasons to do it.
Right. Well, and that's the key. That's the key. So, yes, in general, yes, you should pay your actors if you can. Uh, Now, we're talking about a first time filmmaker who's just starting out and doing something experimental. What you need to offer them, even still, even at that point, you need to offer them a reason to be part of this project. You know, have a vision for where this project is going to go and what the benefit is for them, not just to practice acting. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not a reason for them to do it. What's a reason for them to do it is there's a really good story, a really good opportunity for them to showcase their skills as an actor, and a plan for this to get some type of exposure so that it helps them even if they're not being paid for their time on the project. And one other thing, even if you're not paying actors, you have to treat them with respect, and your crew, not just actors. I mean, your crew too.
Right. Right.
Assuming you have some crew, but that means you feed them well. You do not, you know, work them over unreasonable hours.
Right.
You keep your production uh, within sort of the limitations of expecting something for free. So you don't. And I've been on 100 of these too. I mean, we've been on these. You and I both have not just been on our films. We've had people who have not respected the
Right.
time of the people involved with the project, which puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth. So what you need to do is respect everyone who agrees to work with you on your project and treat them with the most respect that they do deserve. So that means short short hours as possible, as much good food, respecting the right meal times as well, and you need to look these things up, and also great craft services. So those are things that I would say you have to do early on, or nobody's going to want to work with you a
Right.
second time.
And for the cast, get them a copy of the film when you're done. Make sure you distribute that to them so they can put it on their reels. Otherwise,
Absolutely, and
they're
then
not getting
also,
the exposure that they need. Right.
yeah, exactly. And you have to. Here's the one thing that I'll say: if you don't feel like you're going to finish the film, don't start the film. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because everyone's going to invest their time and waste their time if you get it in the editing bay and you decide, well, I don't like this, and then
Right.
don't do it. That's
Yeah,
that's
you've
not
made a
acceptable.
commitment. Yeah, you need to
Yeah,
follow it through. Once you start, follow through.
yeah. That. That is not acceptable. And so, what you need to do, whenever possible, and of course, every now and then, there's things that happen that create a situation where it's impossible to finish a film, right? But at that point, you if you don't finish the film, you would at least need to respect your actors and give them the footage that they put in. So,
Right.
in case it is usable for their reel. But at the same
Right.
time, my advice is if you don't plan to finish, don't start.
So, Martin, you actually brought up a point in your answer on this one. So, here's a question for you. I'm going to submit my film to Cannes or Sundance. Shouldn't I post that in my cast and crew call? We're going to Sundance. Join my crew.
Of course, that's so exciting. No, no, because that that is one of the funniest things, and funniest things these days. But early on, when we first started, we actually, Mike and I also not only made films, we also acted in films. We would go to auditions and get parts, surprisingly enough. But we would, we would look at the casting calls, and most of them would say, Sundance bound, or going to submit to
Right.
Sundance, as if it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to play Sundance
Right.
if submitted. Trust me, the likelihood of a film going to Sundance is very slim, and that's any movie. That's professionals. There are professional uh, people who have huge budgets that don't make the cut at Sundance. So do not put outsized expectations in a casting call.
Right.
That's just setting yourself up for a failure. Of
Well,
course,
it does. People won't take that seriously.
right, right.
Experienced people won't take that seriously. They'll see that and they'll be like, "Yeah, right. I've been there before."
Right, and again, it's not that you don't want to submit to Sundance, because of course you should. You should go shoot for the moon, but
Yeah, exactly.
don't put that kind of expectation out there, because it'll only lead to sort of disappointment. And again,
Yeah,
that's the one thing you don't want. You don't want people disillusioned with the experience they've had. That's the most important part in my opinion, of being a filmmaker, is that you want to create the experience that people want to replicate, even if it's on a low budget, even if it's on a no budget. You want them to enjoy the experience enough to want to do it again. And we've
yeah,
been fortunate. We've been fortunate. We've worked with some of the same people for our whole careers. I mean, there are people who have been in our early films that have been in our latest films.
right,
And so, and that's, to me, that's a blessing that was earned by the fact of how much we respect those people. And so, that's the one thing I keep stressing in this, is that you need to respect the people who are willing to work with you.
right. Speaking of that respect, the next question is kind of a hypothetical, but like I hear this a lot from people, and sometimes it even happens on sets that I've been involved in, and it's like, hey man, I got this great idea for a shot, but uh, camera operator, you're gonna have to hang off the side of this car while we're driving and get this shot. Um, that's guerrilla filmmaking, right? I should just go for it. Let's run and gun. Let's do it. What do you say to that, Martin?
Hell no. Hell no. First of all, this is, some things happen when you're not paying attention in terms of jeopardizing safety. I mean, we both have stories of things that have gone wrong through nobody's intention, but
Hmm.
something that is dangerous, you need to avoid. And this, the primary objective for a filmmaker is to keep the crew intact. And so, never do anything dangerous like that. You
Right,
need the proper equipment for shots like that. Like that, if you have a great idea for a shot, there's a way to do it, but it may be outside of your budget range, because there's certain equipment that needs to be in consideration, or certain other things, like for instance permits, and
yes,
shutting down roads and things of that nature. I mean, again, accidents happen enough even when you're being careful. So you have to be extremely careful and never do something like that.
I always used to be behind when I'm driving on road trips, and I would get behind trucks. um, this is an aside, by the way, sorry. I used to get behind trucks, and on the back of the truck, it would say, "Safety is our goal." And I would always be like, is safety really your goal? Your goal is actually to deliver the product that's in your truck, right? But no, it's true. Safety is their goal. You can have multiple goals. So that's the same thing with the film set. Safety should be your goal on the film set, especially if you are a producer of a short film or film in general. Any kind of above the line uh, crew should be aware of the safety of everybody else at all times. Now we're talking about first short films. Now, do you need to get permits and everything like that necessarily? I mean, it's not necessary to do things, but you do need to have permission to be on
Right,
properties.
right.
There's nothing like trying to steal a shot when you're on private property, and then somebody comes out with a gun telling you to get off their out of their yard. You don't want that to happen. So just take the precautions. You don't necessarily need to fill up a permit with the city or things like that. I mean, that would probably be the preferred way to do it. But
Yeah.
as an indie filmmaker, first time filmmaker, student filmmaker, you might not have those options. But I just always think something to keep in mind: safety first.
Well, you know what? I would say, yeah, it would be a good exercise to try and get a permit if you need it. But, the reality is certain permits require uh, insurance that you are likely not going to be able to
Right.
afford on your first experimental short. So what I would say is yes, it would be great if you could go through the exercise, get the permit that you need, etc. But you know, it, at the very least, you have to have permission for wherever you're going to be shooting. So if it's your cousin's house, you better have your cousin's permission to shoot
Right.
there. You know what I mean? It's not optional not to have it. So that part is essential. But in terms of official permits, you know, it's
Right.
understandable for a first time filmmaker to not have those.
And Martin and I are not lawyers and do not provide legal advice. So
That's right.
this is just our
Disclaimer.
opinions.
Big disclaimer.
um, we're starting to run low on time. I think there's a lot of more questions that could be
Yeah, we
asked.
may have to
And so if
we
you
may have to do a
guys
part
have
two.
more questions after we do this podcast, please let us know because we could do a part two on this very, very easily.
Yeah,
But before we
definitely.
go, let's talk about one more at least.
Sure.
Is it better to submit to festivals or put my film online?
Well, my opinion on this is it's the nature of the project that's going to sort of dictate this. And I think it it may not be obvious what to do, right? I think the idea is that if you're looking for exposure, putting it online will be the quickest way to get exposure. Now, if you're
Hmm.
looking for um, a resume builder, a showpiece builder, then I think the idea is to get recognition from film festivals,
Right.
and that would be um, that would mean that you couldn't put it online because most film festivals are going to want a premiere of some sort, whether it's a world premiere, a national premiere, or a city premiere, a regional premiere. So what you're going to want to do if you do want that recognition, that's sort of the the I guess the curation of being part of a film festival is important to filmmakers on their journey. So you have to kind of forego the online presence. But if it's something that you really are looking for exposure, then online is the way to go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're really trying to build your resume as a director, um, it is much cooler to be able to say, "Hey, I'm an award-winning filmmaker," or my film was in X festival or Y festival." Um, so yeah, there's I guess you just like if you're doing something that's kind of a short skit type thing, put that up
Right.
online. People, you're probably not going to get in a festival, which is kind of a short skit type thing anyway. And B, it's more of a public. You're trying to get more of a public attention than you are trying to get I guess style points as a director. Right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And again, it's the nature of the project because you're right. Like something short and sassy, some kind of little skit is probably something that may not fit well into like a shorts program at a film festival. So just getting it online and getting people to laugh and getting a little bit of recognition for that may be the right way to go. But if you got a legit short film narrative or documentary for that matter, and you're really looking to put a career together, you're probably going to want to go the film festival route, in my opinion.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, I mean, that's about all the time we got for this week's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, if you have more questions, please feel free to contact us at any of the Twitter or Instagram accounts, or get us on CinemATL, and we'll try our best to answer. And maybe we'll do another one of these if you guys found it useful.
Definitely.
So we're going to wrap up this week. I want to thank Eureka Failure again, as they do every week. They provide us the great music that we have on the intro and outro.
Absolutely.
And then also just a reminder that the Movie Madness bracket challenge is going on right now. So you can vote on your favorite sports movies. We're having we're in the round of 64 right now. We're making our way through it, and you can vote on Instagram at CinemATL Podcast. And please share this podcast, rate it where you listen, and comment.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Follow at least the CinemATL podcast, because there's a lot of great content that we're doing on that, thanks to Mike mainly. But fun things like the Movie Madness game is great. So be sure to follow it. If you're listening on the traditionals and you haven't followed us on Instagram, at least follow the CinemATL podcast. I think that would be worthwhile in terms of your Instagram.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I putting a lot of effort into it. I think it's paying off. I think people are enjoying it. So let me know. Let me know if you're enjoying it. Anyway, before we wrap up, Martin, have any final words of wisdom?
Well, I'm getting close to going rogue, but not this time. But what I will say is a little bit more stern than usual. I'll say,
okay.
Hey, less judgment and more kindness. Okay.
I think that I'm not in a position to judge your words, so but I think those are very valid words. Let me put it that way.
Thank you. I think we're in a place where we need a lot less judgment, but a lot more kindness. So let's just do it.
I agree. And on that note, Martin, thanks for doing this podcast with me. I really appreciate it.
I love it. I love doing it with you.
All right. That's it for the CinemATL podcast this week. We'll see you again next time. Bye.